oh gosh, I need to pay rent. So I was working temporary jobs in marketing and PR departments throughout the city, working for a lot of different types of businesses. But we were working with Domingo, Pavarotti, all the famous opera singers at that time. And it was an extraordinary experience. It was an unusual time. It was the mid to late 80s. And there was tremendous opportunity there, but there was also, your voice was looked at like a microscope, and they kind of forgot about all the other stuff that you're actually supposed to be doing on stage, which is actually creating character. But that's what you have to do when you're weeding people out. And it's very stressful because you've got international singers coming in at the same time you're trying to build your career. But that's what the expectation is. So there was a love for it, but there was also some heartache there. Half of our choir died of AIDS.
Right.
Half of our choir died of AIDS when I was there. And you cannot look upon that time without some real sadness. So there was this weird juxtaposition of that environment. At the same time, there was no Me Too environment going on there. Then you had like the ultra heterosexual conductors and Domingos of the world coming in, and there was just an understanding that the world worked that way. And so you had a choice whether you wanted to keep going in an environment like that or not. So it was a tricky time for me.
You got an emotional boost at one point in time when you were down, having a bad day, on an experience in your building with one Mr. T.
Oh my God. Well, I hadn't thought of that one in a while. Okay, so I lived at McClurg Court, which I think is now a condo building in Streeterville. It's 39 floors, so you have a hell of a long time going up and down, if you're coming from the top floor. And Mr. T happened to live in our building. And, and this is one of a couple of times I can think of where I probably had an audition that didn't go as well, or I didn't like the wig I was wearing on stage. Who knows? But I got on the elevator, and I'm on the elevator with him on and off all the time, so I didn't think about him. I was just in my mood. And he looks at me and he goes, "The world can't be that bad." In his own voice. Completely changed my mood by the time I got up to the 39th
Get that chin
floor.
up.
Yes, exactly. Keep that chin up. And he had his gold chains on, by the way, everybody. And so there were moments like that. I mean, I had a time where I was, I'd gone to an audition. Oh, I remember. I was on my way to one and I was late. And of course, the traffic was horrendous. I jumped in a cab, and this guy from some, Middle Eastern country, I said, "Go to 35 Whacker." And he looks at me in the rearview mirror and he goes, "You be looking like you're going to kill me." And immediately, of course, my mood changed. But there was a lot of stress at that time. But there was such great love. I love Chicago. I consider it my second home. I know every crack in the sidewalk. And Lyric Opera is a great place.
How long were you there?
6 years.
And at what point did you start to think that things were maybe going to turn in another direction, or this was becoming too much of a challenge for you?
Well, it was funny because I saw some people, I think this was the difference in me in degree of other singers. Some singers I was working with, this was like be all and end all for them. It was like, this was this career or nothing. And I always had these other interests. I always, when you're doing PR for yourself, which is what you are doing as a performer, no matter what, I was always rather gregarious. I love talking to the dry cleaners. I love, as I said, Her Majesty Industries, the wholesale children's clothing firm. I can tell you about every single person in that building at the time I was working there, because regular people and regular life is very valuable to me. And there's in opera, there's a rather elitist mentality. And I don't say this in a bad way. It's just the way it is. You have to have money people feeding this into this nonprofit environment in order to keep this going. So there's a certain tone to that atmosphere. And some people, they're riding high on making sure that's everything in their life. And I thought, you know what? I have things I love to do other than this, and I'm not sure I'm loving this in this environment anymore. And I want to keep loving music. So I felt it was time for me to rethink whether I wanted to do this forever, but still love it.
And what came to be the not breaking point, I guess it was. Do you remember the day you really made the decision that you were going to step aside?
You know, I was on my way to a coaching with someone who's well known in the industry. Not an easy person to deal with, and that was not unusual. And I was like, wow. As I was walking there, I was walking slower and slower, like, you know what? This is not fun anymore at this particular level for me. And I thought, you know what? It's time to rethink this. And so I didn't even go in. And then I called him later. I said, you know what? I think I'm done with this level. And because I think, again, it becomes less about building and nurturing you as a performer versus how
judging
do we
you.
What'd you say?
Judging you and weeding you out. And I think that's a real problem in all of education, in especially classical music, which is, we'll get to another topic on that one. But anyway, the long story short, I have been doing all this work for all these different companies, and I had a mentor who helped me kind of transition and start thinking about developing my skills in PR and marketing. So that's when I started transitioning. More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Enjoy all the excitement of football season at the 23rd Street Brewery. From the Jayhawks and college football to the NFL and even live-streamed Lawrence High and Free State football games, you can watch it all at the 23rd Street Brewery. Enjoy the games with your favorite menu item like the Bill Self Mac and Cheese, Naked Nachos, or the Haney Turkey Stack. And wash it all down with your favorite beer like a Wave the Wheat or Crimson Fog. 23rd Street Brewery on the corner of Clinton Parkway and Castled in Lawrence.
Hey Kansas City, Joe Spiker, Easton Roofing, back for another beautiful springtime in Kansas City. We are proud to announce our renewed partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Kansas City. Starting in 2024, a portion of every job sold will be donated to a cause close to my heart. I was a big, and I encourage you to volunteer. And if you hire us for service on your residential or commercial roof, you'll know that a portion of the profits will go to a great cause. So call us at 913-257-5426. Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
If you'd like to join these and other fine sponsors and market your business on Kansas City's #1 rated podcast, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to working with you.
Welcome back to Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. I'm Danny Clinkscale. Our guest today is Jayne Siemens, president of Venice Communications. We'll get to that in a little bit. And, of course, we'll also get to the fact that a very lowly accomplished part of the story is that she would eventually become my wife, which is not at all really why I did this. I think this is a fascinating story, although Jayne may be a little reticent about that aspect of it. So you decide that as far as being a full-time professional, you're going to stop singing and move on. How long did you stay in Chicago?
I was there for a couple of years. I had a really good opportunity. My mentor helped me get a job working for a company that this was during the time when the giant pharmaceutical companies were still having their national sales meetings, which were huge, and they needed PR planning, they needed event planning, and they also needed someone who could go out and actually win the business. And so I got this really unique opportunity, and so I walked indoors like, you know, Chicago has every company known to man: Sara Lee, Walgreens, Sunbeam, Abbott Labs was one of our clients. And so that was a tremendous experience. But it was a transition. There's no question about it. Was there
ever buyer's remorse, as it were, over the couple of years there? What was the withdrawal process like from being a full, professional singer?
After that job, I had met the man who was the head of San Diego Opera, and he knew about my background, and he goes, "Why don't you come be our director of PR and marketing there?" I thought, I wonder if I could do administrative stuff, even though that was where I was actually the type of work I was doing as a performer. So I tried it for a very short time, and I realized immediately that I didn't want to have to face those singers' publicists on a daily basis. I knew this environment so well as a singer. So you know what? Interestingly enough, I can't say that I didn't have moments where, I think it was later in my life I realized I probably didn't grieve that passing of that career. So at the time, I just kind of like moved on. I closed the door. I moved on. I started building another life. But it was interesting. It was an interesting process.
Like you said, the time in San Diego was very short term. It's a lovely part of the country, but I know you have a rather, to me, unusual outlook about the Pacific Coast and the fact that it's the wrong way.
Well, yeah, this is so odd. This has nothing to do with me, except I think my mom instilled this in me because of she had a rather unusual upbringing. They had 11 children in her family, and when she was 6 years old, her father died. So that's why I never knew my grandfather. And in that day and age, in the early 20s, meaning 1920s, my God, this was a time when there were all of her relatives had farms, and they were saying, why don't we just split the kids up and each will take a few of all the aunts and uncles. And her mom said, no, we're not doing that. So she, literally, it was grapes of wrath. They drove to Northern California and lived, right in the middle of the avocado fields, the grape fields. And my mother worked. Their whole family worked to survive, so their family would not split up. And so for her, she decided to leave and come back to Kansas when she went to college. She always had sort of a tainted feeling about California. Now, we have a lot of relatives there, and there's no one who wouldn't rather jump on a plane to go visit. But she kind of had me in a weird locked and loaded position on my mentality about the West Coast.
So you're only there a year, and what was the decision to come back to the Midwest?
I just thought, this doesn't feel right, but my parents had actually moved from Newton to Kansas City, where my sister is now, and I thought, I just doesn't feel like the right vibe to me. I mean, I had guys on elliptical cycles in my apartment complex reading Bibles. There was just weird. California's got its own thing going. I'm not saying it isn't fabulous, but it's just got its own thing. I thought, if I'm going to have to get plastic surgery immediately, now your whole body is never going to be. You know what I mean? It's the way it is. So I decided to come back to Kansas City, and I got a job with an ad agency here immediately. So it was a good decision.
Through your professional career as a singer, and then starting off into the business world, you did have serious relationships, but you never married. Do you think your lifestyle or the desire to become a star, as it were, had any effect on that?
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, I'm still to this day surprised that more young women in their 20s, don't have sort of like that. A lot of them do, where they put their blinders on. But there's this new thing now where, people are marrying earlier again and blah, blah, blah. My mom was never somebody, or my parents, neither of them were like, can't wait. She never said that.
Right.
She never said that. This was all about, you go find what I think you would love to do. And so that was always my goal. And so dating was never a main focus, at least for many, many years. But that doesn't mean I didn't, date seriously. I dated someone in Chicago that ended up making Target, the name brand that it is.
Right.
And so, there were moments where, I mighta, coulda, but, that person handed me a recipe book when I wanted to go sing on the stage. I wasn't quite ready to do that.
Right. What was the return to Kansas City and going into the corporate world like for you?
I was very ready at that time, to be, to commit more to working in marketing and PR. And so actually one of the first jobs that they gave me at that ad